the death of Pope Francis, the head of the Catholic Church, the Pope of the big Christian uh, Catholic in the world, I I like to go beyond what's in his story and the death of a, a Pope who tried to renew the faith and reform the church. It's difficult, but I would like to go all the way back to the beginning on how this position actually arose and why it became such a popular and powerful position in the Catholic Church. It didn't start like that in the beginning, and actually, this church has a lot of enemies all over because, well, from within and without, not many people really followed suit of the Catholic Church, even though this Pope has been popular in his person because he was so close to earth and tried to be just a humble man more than being the vicar of Christ and the voice of the power. So there is definitely some really good signs in him as a human, remembering who he is as a person who is serving God and not becoming a God. And so sometimes we can see that when people lose power, they try to bring the external power as a compensation. It's like when you go into a temple that's very simple and people have the power of belief. They do not need all kind of decorations. You can sit in a place where there is just stones and bricks, and a simple carpet, and yet have a very powerful faith within you, a big spirit. And sometimes when that loses faith, well, it gets compensated by these exterior signs that arouses in the place, in its place. It's like you're going to show off your power. And that's maybe how the position of the Pope also developed over time. I'm going to go all the way back and look, but we can see that something happened in the 1870, where the Vatican Council had this new doctrine about the Pope's superiority and flawlessness. And that's a strange thing to go and do so late in the story of the church. That's because we have Napoleon Bonaparte, who took over the power in Europe, and so put the Pope a bit aside. Both the earthly and the spiritual power of the Pope were put a bit aside during the Napoleon era. And so the chair of the Pope had to go and find its way through what was left in the national states and accept the emperor's wishes and ideas. And so they had to turn this around. And in 1870, they made this the flawlessness of the Pope as a sign of the holiness of the chair, that everything this church leader says or does in faith and morals makes him he's doing in a state of flawlessness. So he cannot be doomed wrong or criticized for what he's saying. And it's a kind of showing that, well, this is the role of the Pope that is beyond and over even the kings. Yeah, you cannot take the Pope down on the level of the kings. He's all the way up beside St. Peter's, that eminent role of dominance and greatness in God's name. He's the closest person to God. When he speaks, well, it's the voice of the true spirit of the church. And so we can see that this development so late came in 1870, the First Vatican Council, has its roots all the way back to the beginning of the church. So let's go back. I would like to go back and see, and just taking you with me in this talk, to see how this developed. So we're going beyond Pope Francis's person. I like his person as well, and I was very thrilled to see that he put away this pomp and prakt and didn't live in that castle and tried to be humble and close to people and keep his clothings very simple and humble. And you can feel it in his spirit and person that he wants to be that servant of God and the message of God, and not being that taken in person by power, and it's greed and whatever is behind those closed doors that also with time make people run away from the faith in God. I am from a Muslim background, so it's not up to me to judge or talk about the Christian faith. So, and this is not a defense of the Christian faith either. It's just like a look into it, an observation in a way, because, well, what concerns me is the Word of God, the monotheistic God that I really love, the Abraham's God. And when I look at the Christian church and the Catholics, well, I see part of that going on. And still, when you look at the Reformist and all kind of other churches, like especially the Lutherans and Evangelicans, they went away from that church and broke with it because the reform wasn't possible in the history of the church. And so they went to establish their own churches and way of renewing Christianity and connecting to God without this monopoly on how to do things and why, and the Pope's role in it, that also had been taken in by some corrupt popes through history. We have a lot of stories. Most famous is the stories of that the Pope Borgia and his family, uh, the, that was made to a movie and a series and so on. But I guess when you look in the story of power, you will find this corruption. And so it doesn't go hand in hand with serving God and the message of that humble Christ who really wanted to change the world by turning the other cheek and not gaining power. And when people asked him to give something, he gave it up. He gave his shirt. He said, if somebody asks you to give him his shirt, give him also your what can you say, something more in addition to it. And so this is the problem, that how to look at this Catholic Church. We have the Christian groups and movements who had been looking at it with a bit of criticism, or a lot of criticism, has turned away from it, does not support it. And so it's like working also against a tide of its own people. Then there are the problems in the church that has been arousing for centuries, but also lately in the last 40, 50 years, really showed a very ugly side that has been hidden in there. We know about the corruption maybe, and we can feel that these priests and bishops are not all God-serving men, but power-lust wolves. Some of them would be like that, and all the money they are gaining and saving. But at the same time, imagining that how they overstep the line of the human decency is really too hard to take. And I understand when people turn away from that. That's why I want to go all the way back and look, how did this develop actually? And can this one man really change it? I'm not sure. This Pope Francis has been trying to fight and battle these kind of actions and change his attitude. But what's the whole institution doing around him? And how does it understand itself? And will it go back to its old ways? We will see. At the same time, you have the Muslims who had big quarrels and fights with especially the Catholic Church through history. The Roman Church has been the greatest adversary of the Muslims and hated the Muslims who taken over Jerusalem and wanted to take it back by the Crusades. And the same goes for the Byzantine Church, that also had its quarrels with the Roman Church over the Papacy and over some interpretations of the faith of Christianity. They didn't agree on some of the decrees, and they didn't agree that the Pope in Rome should have the first position. So how did all this actually start? I'm just going a little back. And so when I started in 1870, it was because it was such a special event for the Catholic Church, as in history books, declaring the Pope as flawless. And whenever he does that, he is above the kings and the leaders. And so the Italian kingdom reacted very strongly to that and took in the Vatican as part of Italy. And they had actually the Pope Pio the Ninth as a prisoner in the Vatican at that time. And that stopped when they made this the so-called Laterna Agreement in 1929, where Pope the 11th and Mussolini ended that fight over the Catholic Church and between the Italian Church and the Catholic Church. And so the papal state became a sovereign state with the Pope as its head. and it's from there it begins the modern papal state. And so later in 1947, uh, this was also implemented in the Italian, what can you say, foundation of government and rule, that the Vatican is part of Italy, but it's an independent state. And that has put the Vatican state as the smallest state on earth, but with a special power invested in the Pope in the name of God, having this flawlessness in his rulings. And from there it all went on. People trying like to show that this is the strongest power on earth, because this is the power of the king who's going to reign, and the God behind it, the monotheistic God that is showing that I'm the most powerful on earth, and you can never like take my voice down and away. This is, I guess, the basic deep feelings behind why people would like go and support a small papal state like the Vatican. It was one of the strongest. It's had its troubles in history, but it's one of the strongest small religious states today. So when we go all the way back to see where it comes from, the word Pope is from the Old French papas. It's a word that's used in the Middle Age Latin. In Greek, it's papas. That means the dad, or the papa, the father of something. And so related to the church, the word Pope or Papa is like that father priest and the father bishop of everyone. So when you have those bishops, every bishop have his own area, like in Rome or Constantinople, Alexandria and others. Now you got a gathering figure. And so when Christianity got accepted with Constantine the Great from 313 after Christ, and then the Christianity became available for people, and so more and more people joined it. And later, the Emperor Theodosius, that died 395, he made that declaration that Christianity was the only state religion, and from there, well, the church had to really organize itself in a strong way. In the beginning, the Christians saw this emperor as the voice of the politics, like the earthly power and the godly power. And so he had to have both the universal role as God's voice on earth, and then also being the leader of a political state, or what can you say, an emperor dealing with earthly manners. But Christians reacted as well to that thought, because they had to protect God's voice from politics, and also having to say what they see is true at all times, not taking consideration which pope or emperor is sitting on the throne. And so from there, they had these ongoing, some kind of Caesario-Papanism in one and same person, in the emperor, and having a pope or a bishop who is speaking on behalf of Christianity gave some tensions along the way, of course, because the Christians didn't really accept that this political overhead is always representative for the faith or God's true word. They needed someone who was the religious head to speak on behalf of the church. And so that's why it started to go in two separate ways, or sometimes have these tensions that happens through all history. And the title Pope is meant to and believed to have been used by Ciricio, the Pope Ciricio, who died in 399, who called himself the Father. And from there on, this title has been connected to the Bishop of Rome as the head of the Roman Catholic Church and the leader of the Papal State. And so the same went for the Pope of Alexandria, and later the Byzantine Pope as well. That means the father of the priest and the people who are following the faith. But so they also quarreled internally, because, well, who is the true vicar of Christ? Who is the representative? And so the argument came from Rome, saying to the others, well, it should be the Pope of Rome, because Christ gave the keys to heavens to St. Peter. And when he gave it to St. Peter, that means he has really wanting him to be that special envoy, special voice of the faith. And that's why the Pope of Rome should be the Pope over the popes. And so a big conflict arose from that, because the others couldn't really accept that special role for the Pope in Rome all through the way in history. Also, we have to remember at that time, in the first and second century, even though Christianity had been widespread in the Roman Empire because of the Emperor Theodosius' decree about making Christianity the only state's religion, well, there were also internal disagreements among the Christians on how to perceive God and Christ and the message of Christ, and how to understand God's nature, and all that became the theological disputes later in the councils. And we had many different ways of interpretations based on the evangelicals' writings. So we had Arianus, and we had Marcion, and we had other ideas that didn't really correlate with some of the other ideas that became very popular later. And they had these internal quarrels, how to understand it. And so these people who won the favor of the emperor, basically, they could get rid of the rivals. And so say, well, God's word prevailed because this is what happened. The emperor chose us, and that means he chose the truth. And well, that's not an argument in itself. Many times the truth can be lost because emperors or political people choose wrong. So is the Catholic Church really based on the truth, or is it based on some kind of political power that just made it dominant because their argument was the strongest, or maybe the emperor listened better to it, or understood it, or could use it, as some critics would say. Anyhow, we know when we look at the life of Pope Francis, he's trying to reach out to the other churches, and he's trying to get along even with Muslims, and trying to see people in the light of humanity. That's very beautiful of him. But he's still the representative of this idea that had suppressed other ideas about Christ, especially. We have this Arianian conflict with the priest Arianus, who really saw Christ's nature differently than the Catholic Church has been promoting for the last 2,000 years. And many people say that, well, inspiration from that went on in Islam, or Islam confirmed that inspiration of God's nature as separate from the nature of Christ, as just a human being. And so they were suppressed, and the Pope had a role to play in that, especially because he had the power in Rome. But they could not agree even with the Byzantine Church, who was on the same line as the Catholic when it comes to the nature of God, but not totally, because they saw the nature of God as different in some details than that of the Catholic. And so how could they accept a Pope in Rome that could be the true voice of faith? But the Romans the Romans said, well, that's where St. Peter's got crucified, and Christ gave him the keys to heavens. That's a sign that should be the place, and this is going to be the voice of the true Christ. And that's why many people who follow the Catholic Church really believe in that passion, that they are holding the key to the heavens and the true voice of the Christ, and the others are just blasphemic enemies who are trying to destroy the church from within, or trying to take over and distort the faith. That's a very amazing thing, because the others on the outside would see it the same way. These Christians with other denominations, they would say, well, this Catholic Church has gone all wrong. And that all led to the Nicaea Council and the discussions that happened there, where many churches, every church actually, beside the Catholic Church, were called upon, and then they were declared as illegitimate. That means they have no saying in the faith. They are wrong, and they are not to speak about the faith again. This all should go through the voice of the Vicar of Christ, through the Pope and the seat in Rome. And there were a lot of writings, also a lot of what can you say, evangelical writings that were taken as apocryph. That means they are not really part of the the New Testament and taking away as not coherent with the faith. And so they all gathered around the letters of Paulus, these Catholic priests, and the Pope, and the work of the apostles. And so it became the Apollo teaching that made the fundament for the Roman Catholic Church, while Marconians and Arians and Gnostics and others were taken out as a kind of and any teaching that supported their ideas were also uh, taken out of the canonized Bible, just to show that they are wrong and there is nothing for them to say. And so that in that way they were silenced very heavily and very strong. And you have to ask yourself, well, was that the way to do it, and are they really right? So when I look at Pope Francis, I like his person, but when I look at this history, I say, okay, what is he really representing? And is he giving these apocryph writings any place to be studied again? And what secrets do the Vatican hold? We know today from documentaries and stories that the Vatican library has big secrets on true and old books that has been hidden there for centuries, not letting people knowing what's inside them. And we know about priests and bishops who turn away from the teachings of the Catholic Church when they understand, if they get to understand what's in these writings. We don't know what happens and how they use these texts and what's in them, and either what these priests do, and are these all just rumors or truth. But well, things happens with time, and nothing stays actually hidden. Everything will reveal itself sooner or later. But well, the Catholics took power through the voice of both Paulus, the apostles, and Saint Peter, not the least. And the Pope became the father of Rome. He is the voice of every Christian around the earth. But not everybody agreed on that, as we said. And so the other churches, well, they went their own ways or were persecuted out of the Catholic ways. And they made a canon of literature that every Christian has to follow if they want to be true Catholic. That means universal Christians. And so yeah, we can see that the church really didn't gather, but it actually divided already there. And the voice of the Pope could not be accepted by everyone because, well, they didn't really think that he was true about everything he was saying there. But with time, it developed, of course. The papacy and the bishops under it developed these principles in faith, and the Catholic Church spread wide, also with the help of the state, not the least. And so several church fathers like Irenaeus and others beside him later tried writing about the understanding of the church and the way of the church, the dogmas, the principles. In that way, people trying to learn what kind of Christianity the papacy wants it to teach them. And part of that is that the Pope has a special place, and under him is the four big cities in Rome: Alexandria, Antiochia, and Constantinople. And so it's like dividing the areas into a kind of organizing ways between the other priests and popes that's there, saying you're all under Rome, and Rome is the basis, but there are also popes in Alexandria, Antiochia, Constantinople, and they all refer to the big pope, but still it's a way of organizing people in small entities. And that was actually very effective because the Catholic Church could really get access to people even on the small cellular level of the family and the individual. And all adhered to that bishop in Rome who sat with these rights and privileges above the others. And it was the original, what can you say, group and way that should be adhered to. And these ideas we can see in the writings of Pope Clemens the First of Rome, died 97 after Christ. He wrote the first Clemens letter to the community in Corinth, giving them some sort of dictations on their Christian life and organizing. And so, in that way, he gave himself that voice. And later, the Bishop Victor I wrote from Rome's a chair um, answers to questions regarding the church that people had to follow and adhere to. So it was already a tradition from the beginning, in all times, that the bishops in Rome had this special understanding of their role, and people asked them, and people had to follow the questions they had to do. But of course, all that led to clashes from time to time, because sometimes they could not agree internally, but they could not also agree with some of the kings that were ruling against them. And we know that also throughout history, that the papacy has been in quarrels and troublesome times with the kings around them. And so it's understandable that the church has to have this big organization, because it had a great appeal for the people in the Middle East, Mediterranean, and North Africa and European continent. And so, with the spread of the Roman Empire and the Christianity within it as a state, faith of state, it had, of course, a great appeal, even though there were divisions and misunderstandings. And so the church had, of course, to organize all that, and to organize it well, they had one voice and needed one voice. That's called the Pope, the voice of Christ, the voice of all the Christians around the world. And so in that way, the Pope got this very special position, as Bishop Stefano argued in 254, 255 after Christ, saying, well, Saint Peter had this special place among the disciples, and he had also been given the keys to heaven, as in Matthew's 16 to 18, or 16:18. Well, the Bishop of Rome should have this special role as well. And from there, well, with the organization of the state and the organization of the political power in the Roman Empire, it became natural that the Christians had one central voice with a central power called the Pope. And from there, well, it shifted. And we have to remember, the Pope was not being declared as flawless at that time. He was just a human who was the father to the faith, but was to be listened to and not to be argumented against or criticized for any of what he did. And well, that also led to a lot of struggle with time, with the kingships and the people in power around the papacy, or in the states where the papacy were spread, because these kings could, of course, not accept that there was now a voice that could take people in another direction than theirs. What if the king wanted people to go to fight and the Pope said no, or the Pope wanted people to fight and the king didn't want to? So they tried with time, one putting the other under his power, and they failed miserably, and they failed a lot of the times, and they went into a lot of struggles in history. And so it all got to the top of crisis when the Pope Leo I, from 440s, he wanted the church to be the head of everything, as in opposition to the other churches. And he wanted the emperor to make it a decree that the Holy Seat in Rome had its rank above all the other churches, and everyone who denies that will be persecuted or punished. And so that made a schism in the church from that time. It was a big turn in the church history, that now it's not something the church just agreed upon within itself, that there is a pope or there is someone who had a voice that's stronger and bigger and deeper on behalf of all Christians. It was also now the emperor who interfered and made the Pope of Rome the only voice people should listen to, and everybody who did not adhere would be punished or persecuted. And that came out in a decree in 445 by the Emperor Valentinian II, where he said the Rome's bishop is the follower of Peter, and he has that that certain position beyond everybody else, and everybody who disagree with that order of the church and its overhead, well, will be punished. And so now the Pope and the Emperor were in a new alliance that had been crackling and not always on the same line, the same page, but they found each other in a kind of understanding to share that power and monopoly over the earthly and heavenly sphere. But later, of course, this also came to disagreements because the emperors later wanted to have the Pope do as they like, and the Pope could refuse or did not like the way the power of the politics were going, and so disagreed with that, and that also made the big disagreements in the centuries to come that waved on forth and back with conflicts between the religious political power. And so we could see that this was never going to rest. Wherever there is power, there's going to be conflicts, and that's what's happening all the time. Also with the religious figure in the Catholic Church. And just to pick out two examples from history, there was the inauguration of Benedict the Seventh, the Pope, in 974, where a lot of intrigues happened because the emperor didn't like him and wanted somebody else instead of him, and put actually an anti-pope instead of him. The same later happened with Henrik IV, the emperor, from 1056, and the Pope Gregor VII, where the emperor didn't like the pope and wanted to have another pope instead, so he made another position and called it the kind of anti-pope position. So we had periods in history where, well, there has been two popes at the same time, and in the end it could not go on like that. And we also in the meanwhile had the Crusades, and we had the Temple Knights, and also a lot of Christians also turning inwards towards themselves and the spirituality of Christianity, the monks and the way of life that looked away from that kind of political struggle, because now they are not representing the faith anymore. They're representing some kind of struggle over power, who should be the one who is in the leadership and who is not. And so it could not go on, but it went on actually until the end of the 1300s, where the Pope actually lost a lot, papacy lost a lot of its power to the emperors and the kings. And so it ended with Bonifacius VIII in his conflict with Philip the Beautiful, or Philip the Cute, or the Beauty, who actually made the papal seat give a lot of its supremacy and power to the heavenly leadership. So it's like the kings are trying to take back that old emperor seat as the leadership of the earthly and the heavenly spheres. It's like the king wants to be the man who represents both, and the Pope just has just to follow suit. But, well, things never stay the same. And so when these kind of struggles go on, they go on for a certain time. And so between the 13 and 1500, the kings had in Spain and France and England got into big political struggles that also made them weak. And so a lot of things happened in that period that could be also interesting for people who look into history, and the Catholic Church was in the very centrum of it just before the Renaissance. And so these struggles between especially the big nations, France, Spain, England, and Italy at that time, well, gave the power somehow, the papacy, some of its power back. And so at the same time, they had to adhere to the king's wishes and make them like the supreme rulers, and see them as also the representatives of the religion, as the true representatives of religion. And so we can see that this faith that was meant to be non-political had gone from being the papa of the Christians, the followers of Christ, and the people who want to seek the heavenly sphere, to become a political fight that loses the piece of of the soul. And so you have to sometimes just go on with politics so long that you forget what maybe the message was all about. And some people could see that, and so they went away from that so-called Catholic way and started their own ways. And it all culminated, of course, with the Reformation and with Lutheran Protestantism, that by a miraculous thing happened, not to be persecuted and killed. Martin Luther and several others started their own ways, and they became like the Protestant ways. And so some of the kings shifted to that, and some of the queens. And then we are into the Renaissance area here, where papacy is losing a lot of its power to some worldly ideas about humanism, universalism. Universities were taking hold in some of the educated minds, and not the least the kings in Northern and Western Europe wanted to go away from that papal control and the control of the church. Also, the struggle between the kings and the church under the Catholic Church. So to sum up, before I go back to Pope Francis, who recently died, it's like the Pope, he is the follower of Peter. He has the keys to the heavens, and everyone who want to go through the gates of Christianity has to be adhering to the voice of the Pope, because that's adhering to God himself. This is God's wish and will that will come out through the flawless words and decrees and guidance of the Pope himself. Even the kings and the priests and whoever, they are all beneath that realm and that power. So if you could say the kingdom of Christ is going to show in any way, it was going to show in the voice and in the seat, the holy seat of the Pope, who is representing God's power on earth. But, well, the earthly power did not really agree to that and did not follow that easily. And so even though the Pope tried to unfold his power, it stayed as a struggle, as we just have been seeing, between the power in Rome and the power with the other churches, and also the kings of the different nations, who did not always want to listen to what this Pope had to say, and not really agreeing that he was the voice of God, but maybe more a political voice who was maybe against him and with another kind of policy. And so it never really rested in that way. And so up until now, we can see that even though the Pope is kind of incarnation of this message of God from heavens, its manifestation is very doubtsome in many people's eyes. And so if you look at it from the Muslim perspective, well, they are representing a faith that is not really true. This is a distorted message of Christ. He was taken to heavens and not really put on the cross. It was his friend Judah, who's been seen as a traitor, who was actually taking his place, self-sacrificing himself. So the church has gone wrong there. But they know the truth. It's hidden in the Vatican archives, as the Muslims would of course say. And you have the other Christian groups who would say, well, we are on the same page when it comes to Christ, but we do not agree with certain ways of working out Christianity in the way the sacrifices and who is holy and who is not holy, and who has the power to decide who's going to heaven and not, and which way to follow in your life. We have to follow what's in the Bible, or how Christ lived, and not what the Pope is telling us that Christ did and how he lived. And so also disagreements appeared there with time, that also made very difficult situation for the Pope. And now in modern times, it's not easier at all when the Pope has all these troubles with money, economics. God knows what kind of valuables they have there, and using to manifest the word of God and to manifest their positions and seats. And so even though Pope Francis is a very likable, really likable figure, I liked him from the beginning, there is a lot behind him in that institution that's not so easy to deal with. Also for him, maybe someone would kill him if he tried to do a lot in one time. I know that from the Muslim world is the same. If you try to change anything in these institutions that has grown into its way of looking at things, the power and the way of leading the church, it's only sometimes through the pure hearts that things change. And when people really take up that purity inside themselves, things also happens on a bigger level within the people who hold the power. They change as well, because when people grow into that intensity of purity and wanting the afterlife more than this life, wanting the love of God more than the love of money and power, things affect people. And then from there, one or two persons will rise to the power with these hopes and this spirituality in them, and they will make the change that's going to be acceptable. But, well, that's not the situation. So even though I could see he's really trying to go humble and to stay close to earth, but it's very complicated. He's the head of a nation. He's at the same time the voice of the Catholic Church, and he is the representative of a faith who had really taken many, many hits, and from inside and as outside, corruption and greed and mistreatment and a lot of things that's really ugly. And at the same time, taking hits from the outside, both from other Christians who do not agree on the Christian decrees, but also from other religions who do not like the way of the Catholics. So um, it's not easy to have been this man, and I don't know if I wanted to be in his shoes at all, sitting there in that way. And well, who knows? I like that he tried, and I like that he really wanted to show compassion to people. That's what matters, I guess. But walking through the history of the papacy gave me also inspiration to understand that there are more to it than just a man. It's an organization, it's a lot of people in there, and it has to reflect the people on the street and their spirituality. And if people are not believing, just going to be part of the church as a tradition and culture, but do not really believe, do not really trust in these priests and their way of using power, something is totally wrong. And yeah, I don't know where it will go. Um, it can become, but it has been very resistant, and it's one of the few organizations that has really been very resistant since the first century of Christ. It's very amazing to see how, despite all the hits and troubles and disturbances inside and outside, it has held together and it has achieved a lot among the people. The same goes for the Islamic faith. You can see that it has taken many hits from the inside and outside, and still it's going on, getting the support of millions around the world. And so you can say the same with Judaism. That's really amazing how it held together around the message of the one true God, despite everything that the Jews has been going through in history as well. So I believe beyond all that there is a God, the monotheistic God, speaking through these different ways. And I know they don't believe that themselves. They want to hold the truth as a monopoly, each one of them. And I understand that because God has given the truth in each message, telling them, you are the truth, follow it. Christ say, I am the way, the truth, and the light, follow me. And Muhammad had been saying the Quran, follow the Quran, this is the truth. And Judaism would say, stick to the teaching of Moses and David. And this is the only way of salvation. You are the chosen people. Don't go astray with these false prophets. And Christ was not the one who was chosen, and so on and so on. So everyone is trying to hold on to that monotheism. And that's what I like about it. This is my perspective into this. But well, Pope Francis, yeah, a popular figure and a loved Pope, a person before Pope. And well, I have a friend who stood very close to him once in the Basilica, and just behind him, a few steps when he came out. And he really felt that this man had a kind of humility and humbleness over him. He didn't really liked being in that power. He was not filled of it, but he was more like, I'm just a human. I'm trying to represent the faith that leads us to God and heavens. That's the part I like about him very much. I hope he will rest in peace and get forgiveness from the one true God, but I'm not sure. I don't know, because who knows? And we can only try and seek. Results is not ours. And everyone who thinks he knows or she knows that she is in salvation has to rethink again, because we can trust in love, in the love of God, but to trust that you are really on the right path and have found the truth, history keeps showing us perspectives and ways that has been hidden from us, that shows we maybe hasn't been all that right as we thought we would have been. So to live with some kind of doubt, but a great hope in love, the message of love, that's the beauty of believing in God.